All right. GM, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome in, Bullet Nation. Just in case you were wondering where that location is we were showing in the intro, that's actually Bullet City. It's the capital of CLOB Nation. All right. So welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking CLOB Wars today. Let everybody kind of filter in. I see some new friends are coming in. What up? GTADL, what's going on? I see you in the chat, sir. What up? Yo, yourself. So chat, feel free to ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer them. But I've got the Bullet team with me. I've got Monk with me, and just want to do some quick intros. We've got Anmol and Tristan, the co-founders of Bullet. And from the growth team, we've got Matrix. And our special guest today is DeFi Monk. Now, I want to jump kind of right into things. Monk, can you give us like a little bit of background on you, who you are, what you do? The people just want to get to know Monk.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am real name Sonny, Twitter name's Monk. I am currently at Messari. I am an enterprise research analyst there, and so we write all of the thematic reports at Messari for our enterprise clients. And I've been covering CLOBs for a while now. I would say it started since a year ago when I first started covering Hyperliquid, where I kind of thought this on-chain CLOB built on a highly performant, dedicated L1 was a DeFi primitive, and I think it continues to be a DeFi primitive. And Hyperliquid has kind of paved the way now for all of these CLOBs to kind of show the market, hey, like this works. This has PMF. This is a great application, and it can make a ton of app revenue and generate a ton of trading activity. And we can make CLOBs on-chain that are as competitive as those off-chain, like those on Binance and other centralized exchanges. And so as a result, I think everyone who follows me knows that I'm a diehard Hyperliquid fan.
Right.
But maintaining 80 to 90% market share is just not sustainable in DeFi. This is something that we've seen time and time again. And I think Hyperliquid will continue to grow because it's going to expand the pie dramatically for all CLOBs. But the question for me is also like, hey, who are these upcoming next generation CLOBs that are interesting in taking unique design choices and can carve out some space for themselves down the line and maybe even become like the on-chain Bybit or whatever to Hyperliquid's on-chain Binance. And so that's a quick introduction on me. I've written one report on CLOBs as like a actual narrative.
Yeah.
I'm currently working on the part 2 where I dive a little bit deeper into just the individual CLOBs themselves, design choices that they're making, and what sets them apart. So stay tuned for that.
Amazing, man. Yeah, you've been a huge part of the CLOB narrative becoming so dominant in the last couple of weeks. So we definitely wanted to get your perspectives and have you on the stream. So super glad you're here, man. Thanks for being here, and super excited to get your perspectives. Excuse me, coffee's still hitting. I realize I might have gotten a little ahead of myself, though. In case any new folks are in here, let's give a little background on Anmol and Tristan, the co-founders of the projects. Anmol, let's start with you, man.
Yeah, been around DeFi and DEXs since before Uniswap. So been around for a while and just like seeing all the different like evolutions and iterations. And obviously 2021 with Zeta, we built our own DEX, one of the first CLOB DEXs on an L1, and the first one that was doing like options and futures. And yeah, now I guess we're just evolving into Bullet and trying to push the boundaries there in terms of building something that's far more scalable, far more competitive.
Amazing. Tristan, what about you, man? Some quick, the Tristan quick backstory.
Hopefully people know me. Yeah, also co-founder with Anmol, been around the space for a while, kind of resident CLOB maximalist and shit poster on the team. But yeah, I just love building stuff that goes fast and solves real user problems. Been building for a number of years. And yeah, like Anmol said, we started in the very early days of Solana. It kind of really drew us to the performance benefits of the chain. We've always tried to focus on, fast, low latency systems. And yeah, I think we have pretty interesting year ahead of us. So I don't know, I'm just like super heads down building stuff, trying to get us to mainnet essentially. So yeah, it should be fun.
Definitely, man. And we're going to be talking about all that. Newest member of the team is Matrix. Matrix, can we get a quick intro from you?
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, so I've been in crypto for about 4 years now. Mainly been doing solo work, freelance stuff, trading on the side. And then, yeah, after I graduated from university, so I really wanted to join a crypto protocol and be working in crypto full time. And I think definitely Bullet, a CLOB DEX is where I really wanted to be in, especially because of my trading background. And yeah, super excited to be working with all of these guys.
Definitely. Awesome. So that's the team. We got a Dream Blunt rotation over here. Chat, if you got any questions, remember to just drop them in there, and we'll keep going. So for anybody that doesn't know, CLOBs aren't new. They've been around since TradFi, right? It stands for Central Limit Order Book. But I kind of wanted to kick things off with just kind of asking, what's making CLOBs more relevant right now compared to even a few months ago, back when there was only like DYDX, GMX kind of times? Sonny, do you want to start there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been many attempts to build a fully on-chain CLOB on less performant blockchains, and so obviously Ethereum, the Ethereum mainnet is one of those. Ether Delta was an attempt many years ago that just didn't really take off, and then you had Solana, which is supposedly a more performant. I mean, it is a more performant L1, but even then we couldn't get early iterations of fully on-chain CLOBs to work on the Solana L1 with CRM or Phoenix or any other attempts. Zeta Markets being one of them as well.
Sure.
And I think for a while people just kind of assumed that this wasn't possible. Like you either had to build an order book with most of the actual underlying infrastructure of the order book off-chain, like DYDX v3, or you had to basically build some kind of a VAMM pool or a peer-to-pool model, or do RFQ, or just try any way possible to skirt around building an actual order book, even though we've seen in TradFi that order books are the most expressive way for market makers and for takers to express pricing and make specific trade orders based off of their view of pricing. And so why it's relevant now, it works now. I think for the first time ever, it just works. And it doesn't just work, it works actually really well. And Hyperliquid, as an example, is still an L1 and still has to go through a consensus mechanism.
Right.
And even then, block times are still 70 milliseconds, which in TradFi, I'm sure seems very slow. I mean, TradFi exchanges are operating in the millisecond, sometimes even like the nanosecond latency range if you're extremely co-located. But Hyperliquid, I think, opened the floodgates. They introduced a ton of interesting mechanisms to kind of help bridge the performance gap from on-chain to off-chain. So they introduced speed bumps, cancel prioritization. They introduced co-located validators to allow market makers to co-locate and reduce their end-to-end latency. And so now we're seeing that all of these things can create a really good end product. Yeah. And what really excites me is, Bullet, other CLOBs like Rise Chain, etc. They're not just launching, they're not just launching at performance parity with Hyperliquid. A lot of them are actually launching way faster. So they've got even better latencies. They're launching as rollups, so they don't even have to worry about consensus. They're offering co-location from day one. Bullet is offering multi-asset margin from day one. And so all of these things are basically net improvements to the overall on-chain CLOB space. And if Hyperliquid has showed us that they can already create one of the best CLOB products in the space, both on-chain or off-chain, then I'm really excited to see what's coming next. And so, yeah, short answer is it finally works.
Yeah, I mean, that's about it. Tristan, did you want to chime in on that? Anmol, you guys have anything to add? Please do.
No, I largely agree. We came from building on the ETH side of things in the early days, and it was just kind of harrowing looking at the state of on-chain order books. Like, we were trying to do options back then. We were looking at some of the protocols there, and they had, what was it, and more like 1 or 2% spreads, if not more, 5% spreads on a lot of their markets. You would have to pay $20 just to place an order in terms of the gas fees to do stuff on chain. And it's like, hey, this is a very cool proof of concept. It's all decentralized and runs in a smart contract, but like no one is ever in their right mind going to use this. And that's, I think, what was really cool about Serum in the early days. Like I didn't fully grok Serum when I first looked at it, and I'm like, oh, like it's just an order book. Then I didn't kind of realize it's become, or like its goal was to become the backend for all these different applications to tap into that one native order book. You'd have different front ends. You would have people building vaults or other kind of protocols on top of that, and everything kind of pipes down into that one order book. I thought that was really cool. And it was actually relatively performant. Like I would trade on it and trades would go through and you have people market making. And so it was pretty nice. And I think it hit that scale, you know, let's call it like tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in volume. I think at some point it even got to $1 billion, but you know, that's probably just Alameda just flushing a bunch of volume through it. But yeah, it obviously hit some limits, and there were certain scaling issues, and obviously the code basically hadn't been touched for multiple years at that point. So we tried to kind of like carry the torch and kind of apply a bunch of that stuff for derivatives. And yeah, kind of what Monk said, like doing it on a general purpose chain, I think is pretty like ambitious. You know, and we did try that for a couple of years, and I'd like to say that I explored the design space like very hard, and there will still be advancements, but on the time scale that, you know, teams and entrepreneurs need to innovate, it needs to be very fast. Like we need to be snappy in terms of pushing out new stuff every week, every month, essentially. When you're trying to basically coordinate massive upgrades to a network that is as widely adopted as Ethereum or Solana, it takes kind of years, and that's understandable.
Right.
And so I think that's what's been cool about some of these newer players is once you have a bit more of an app specific chain, you have a bit more discretion, you can push out features a lot quicker, you can iterate, you can talk to users, you can make those changes, you can make opinionated trade-offs on stuff, you know, things like the cancel prioritization that Sonny mentioned, shortening the block times, doing all these kind of things. They were like kind of out of our reach for the longest period. And now we've gone through and we've just been like, what is our ideal feature set? You know, let's put the shopping list of what we want, and let's just basically bake that into the protocol and kind of build the best thing that we can. And that was basically my decision like a year ago. I'm like, yeah, we could be 20% better than the next guy on Solana, and I don't really care about that. Like, it's not really interesting to us anymore. Like, let's just, you know, swing for the fences and try and give this a big shot and try and actually pull something off that's like a bit more ambitious. And that's basically what we've been trying to build.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I think this is stupid, but I think people just kind of also like to say CLOB. I mean, look at the chat. Everybody's just CLOB, CLOB, CLOB. I mean, you see it on a timeline, man. Like, you can just post CLOB. It's just fun to say, right?
Wait, Sonny, who coined the CLOB Wars? Someone attributed to me, but it was definitely not me. Was it you or someone else?
It wasn't me. I was actually, I've seen it floated around. I thought about seeing it more, but I didn't want to kind of pit these CLOBs against each other. But I think Ansem said people are under indexing to the CLOB Wars, and that kind of set everything off. So it's always Z.
That sounds like
Z
Ansem
somehow.
Yeah. Always starts the trends.
We love that. Yeah, we do love it. We love it. So guys, if you're just joining us, we're talking about what's making CLOB so relevant right now. Obviously, CLOB Wars are going on. We're seeing a lot of CLOB narratives. Anmol, is there anything that you wanted to add to that before we move on?
Yeah, I also think it's just like one thing is like it works, but then I think the timing as well, like this cycle, like all the stuff worth trading was on chain, right? Like everything that launched on the centralized chain was a bit of a waste of time, a bit of a disappointment. So then I think the question becomes like, how do you scale these volumes on chain as well? Like the AMMs can only go so far. And then like if you want to scale and you want to have derivatives, which normally trade more than spot as well, it's like, how do you scale all this like on chain? I think the answer is like, we need really performant like CLOBs to actually enable this stuff as well.
Oh, we got a question already coming in. Which CLOB wins? What is the exact feature you can attribute it to? I don't know. Anybody want to take that one? Anybody want to touch that one? So anyway,
I'm just going to put my opinion out there. I think a lot matters. There's a lot more that matters than just the CLOB and the technology. I think that's like a very small part of the pie. And I think everyone and their dog these days knows how to build a CLOB. So I don't see that as like a major differentiator. And I think, it's becoming kind of a table stakes thing. Like Sonny said, like a lot of these things are coming out. Chains are performing enough to kind of support these things. I think you're going to see a lot of guys with competitive CLOBs and similar kind of features around that. Like, how much does it matter that someone's matching engine is 1 millisecond in terms of, instead of 5 milliseconds? I don't think it makes a big deal.
Sure.
But there's going to be lots of other kind of areas that I think people can differentiate and win in.
So that kind of brings me to my next question. Like, we obviously, based on the title of the stream, you can see it. We're in it, right? Let's talk about the CLOB Wars. I mean, what's your overall thoughts on this scene right now, guys? Sonny, let's start with you, since you kind of have a large role in kicking off this narrative, in my opinion.
I think for the most part, it's a lot of older CLOBs. It's Hyperliquid taking everything, and then it's a lot of newer CLOBs that are mostly in testnet or have not launched yet or are just now launching. And so it's really hard to say what happens for now. What I really like to think about is going back to what Tristan just said in his last response. It's not just the tech itself. At some point the tech just gets kind of diluted down to table stakes, and everyone kind of has the same things going for it from an actual infrastructure and performance standpoint. I like to think about like what is actually differentiating you, what ecosystems are you close to, and which users are you attracting. And I think that makers will move anywhere, right? Like market makers will move anywhere where they can make money. And so if there are 20 Hyperliquids, they will market make on all 20 of these CLOBs. I think the difference is like, how do you convince a taker to use one product and not the other? You can start off with incentives, but once that wears off, like who's actually coming in as a steady state user that you can kind of attract to your ecosystem versus any of the others. And so, like as an example, Mega ETH is a great example where the roll up itself is performant enough to support a composable order book within its broader ecosystem. And so, if you're an active Mega ETH user, maybe you want to try out GTE or you want to try out Valhalla, and the proximity to like a broader ecosystem, I think, does matter in this scenario. For Bullet, what I think is really, really interesting, and what makes me really bullish on Bullet as like an actual CLOB is the fact that there will be like a quick bridge away from Solana mainnet. And obviously Solana right now has all the users. I would say that the only real users that pay for a service of some kind to actively trade exists pretty much purely on Hyperliquid and Solana today. And a lot of these Solana users have not migrated to Hyperliquid. Like maybe they're not interested right now. Maybe they just don't want to leave Solana. Maybe they're used to Phantom and they're used to like everything that they're doing within the Solana ecosystem. And I think especially with Alpenglow, the finality to bridge to a network extension is going to be really, really quick, much quicker than it would be to bridge to like an L2 on Ethereum. And so the UX fragmentation is not going to be as stark. And what that means is, I think for a lot of Solana users, hopefully these guys are working on some cool UX improvements right now to onboard. But hopefully the process to deposit onto Bullet will be as simple as using a Solana application. And so if you are on Solana today, if you're in the pump fund trenches, if you're a degenerate trader and you have not yet been introduced to perpetuals with leverage, maybe you go and look at that deposit button. You're like, okay, let me check this out. This seems like a smooth process. And so I think Bullet probably has carved out a really, really unique space within the CLOB Wars as the CLOB that is closest to Solana mainnet, even if it's not directly on Solana mainnet. Perhaps you can get to a place where that's so abstracted, where the bridging is so abstracted that to an average Solana user, it feels like they're still on Solana.
For sure. It's funny that you say that, because I actually wanted to piggyback off of what you're saying about onboarding, because I think the team does have some solutions for that. Do you guys want to talk about what you're doing in terms of onboarding for Bullet, and how that's going to kind of change the game for people?
Yeah, for sure, man. Maybe I can start first. So
yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, definitely agree with what DeFi Monk has said. So definitely there's a lot of Solana users that are untapped with respect to the perp space in general. Then currently the perps volume on Solana is around 10-ish% of what Hyperliquid is achieving. So there's actually a huge gap that hasn't been filled, right? Then for us, definitely we are working on onboarding all these users. I think especially from case studies like Axiom. So Axiom actually offers a front end for Hyperliquid, and a lot of Solana trenchers are actually using the Axiom Hyperliquid's front end to actually trade perps. So clearly there is actually an appetite for these trenchers to start trading perps, but then there currently isn't a suitable protocol or like a proper onboarding process that allows them to trade perps easily on the Solana ecosystem. And we are actually working very hard on that. So I think For example, we are using the private extension to ensure smooth onboarding of Solana assets, as well as connecting with infrastructure that is familiar to Solana users, such as using the Phantom wallet and then depositing Solana or USDC straight to the Bullet network. And yeah, these are some of the steps that we are doing to make sure that onboarding is really seamless and makes it really easy for Solana users to also start trading perps as well.
Definitely, man. And you can try this right now, guys. The app.bullet.xyz, just go there. You can access the testnet, try it out. I mean, it is pretty seamless and it's fast. It's really, really fast. So
I can tack onto that as well. On like the technical side, we've been making pretty good breakthroughs. Like Matrix said, we've been pretty early partner with the Privy guys, like quite close with their team, and that just kind of allows for kind of seed phraseless onboarding. You have social login, all that kind of stuff. I think kind of democratizes or makes it accessible to like a non-crypto audience as well, which is cool. Probably not the focus for now, but like at some point in the future, we're working on some on-ramp solutions as well, just getting people straight in there. I think that's kind of, you know, if people have to jump via a centralized exchange to onboard and then start trading, we've kind of failed at our job essentially. But then on top of that, there's just a lot of stuff that we can customize on the chain level. One, we're using the same base 58 addressing scheme that Solana uses. So all the kind of addresses look and feel very familiar. We're really trying to improve that onboarding experience. Like Sonny mentioned, because the finality on Solana is already 12 seconds and is going to get down to literally like a second or a couple of seconds. It's not going to feel like a typical ETH L2 bridge essentially, which takes 15 minutes. You know, it's going to be very snappy. And like he alluded to, there are some UX tricks, I think, that we can chuck in there to make it basically feel like you're depositing into like a L1 protocol, essentially. And that's kind of how it should be. You know, if you were using a perps exchange anyway, like we had Zeta on the L1, like we didn't have that many people needing to compose with the perps platform. So like you're still using the same front end, you're still depositing, you know, whether that kind of goes into the bridge contract or directly into the L1 contract. I don't think it matters too much, as long as you can obviously trust the security model. And so we can abstract a lot of that away, which I think is really cool. And the good news on that, we're making a lot of progress. The bridge integration was done as of last week, and we actually got our first testnet kind of bridge transfer done this morning. So good progress is being made, and it's fast and it's looking good. So give us a couple more weeks, and hopefully we can start demoing that on mainnet as well.
Amazing, man. Wow. A lot of CLOB talk right now. Chat, remember, if you guys got any questions, drop them in there. Any questions for the Bullet team, questions for Sonny. But
I had one other question for Matrix, actually. I was curious, Matrix, have you looked into the numbers of how much of Hyperliquid volume is coming from like Axiom type integrations? I think that would be like really telling as to what kind of flow is being driven there.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if those numbers are available actually. Yeah, but definitely we got to look into that.
It's very low right now. It's very low right now for Axiom. I think mostly I think it's under like 10% of Axiom's revenue actually comes from Hyperliquid. Most of it is coming from the Solana trenches. But PvP.trade, for example, is a front end built on Hyperliquid and has made over $8 million in revenue. And so I think there's plenty of opportunities for like some of these front ends to help abstract away the underlying chain itself. It's difficult because it's going to be so competitive too, just like for all of these front ends to take share from each other. But yeah, I think front ends with perps is still something that is relatively unexplored versus like I think meme coin sniping and meme coin trading. At this point, it's very clear that people want front ends.
Agree. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the numbers like Matrix mentioned. I think it's Hyperliquid's routinely doing 10 times the perps volume that Solana is, but it's actually kind of the opposite when you look on the spot side. Solana is doing 5 times what Hyperliquid is doing on the spot side. So both have kind of started in different directions, optimized for 2 different things, and it's kind of interesting how there's a bit of a tug of war there. I was curious on the front end side as well. Like, what do you think about mobile, Sonny? How much do you think that caters into it? I know that's definitely been something that Hyperliquid has maybe been pulled up a little bit on, is their mobile trading experience is not the greatest. And that seems like potentially a really big opportunity given how apps like Robinhood are really, really popular in traditional markets. And I think really opened up the door to retail investors to get into equity markets.
I want it. I mean, like I have to. I love trading on mobile. Sometimes when you're just watching TV and something happens, You don't want to run to your desktop computer to go like place a trade. Like sometimes you just want to pull up your. I mean, for an example, like when I heard that Trump was going to start taking people into the White House for like the top 100 Trump holders or whatever, I'm like, oh, this seems like an obvious long. I got this notification right away. And so
you got to run to your computer, open it up. You got to like put in your password, sign the transaction. Yeah.
What if you're not home?
No, so I wasn't home, so I had to like go on my MetaMask. I had to like go use the MetaMask browser to get on Hyperliquid and to place that trade. And so I would love for there to be like a good mobile front end for perps. But yeah, for now, I think most of the users doing volume today are perfectly okay with desktop. But I think if we're thinking long term, mobile has to be in play.
Yeah, I think also if there are any builders in the audience who have good app skills, like we'll probably build one at some point. But if people are very keen on that, please let us know, because I think a really good opportunity there is doing something similar to like the broker program or Hyperliquid's like builder codes, essentially, where there's some kind of like fee share between the base layer and like application front ends. And I think that's just like a massive opportunity to build on us, to build on Hyperliquid, build like a really killer front end or kind of mobile app, and then have some kind of revenue share there. Essentially, I think it's just like a really good opportunity for someone who's just like a cracked front end dev to kind of make their mark.
Yeah,
Definitely.
It makes sense as well, right? Because like that's how like AMMs evolved, where like there's all these like different interfaces for people to like access AMMs, and like they don't go directly through the AMM. So like it makes sense to have like terminals, aggregators, like different UIs, all sorts of things, where like the CLOB is like the primitive on the back end.
100%. Hello, team. Hello, Leonard McDougan. Thanks for joining the chat. I see we got a couple other friends. Victor, thanks for joining the chat. Guys, if you got any questions, you can drop them in here. If you're just joining us, we're talking all things CLOBs. So shifting back to CLOBs for a second, Sonny, I wanted to ask, like, in terms of what works and what doesn't, like, how do we distinguish that when it comes to CLOBs?
So generally, I think of trade-offs basically as, okay, are you building this general purpose? Are you building this dedicated? Are you building this with speed bumps, or are you going to build it as neutral, like FIFO trading territory? Are you going to build it on a roll-up with out consensus, or are you going to build it so you can do like a real-time streaming sequencer? Or are you going to do it as an L1 with co-located validators? And so those are like the main slices of how I view the CLOB landscape. And each one comes with different trade-offs. Like a general purpose blockchain will generally, if you want to be building like an on-chain order book, it will be more expensive for market makers to have to pay gas. You're going to have to deal with congestion from noisy neighbors. There's going to be probably far more latency variability versus doing it on a dedicated chain, whether that's an L2 or an L1. You get to control a lot of factors. You get to control how transactions are routed if you want to do cancel prioritization. From the L2 versus the L1 front, L2 is just always going to be faster. There's no way that an L1 is ever going to compete with an L2 that's running like a real-time streaming sequencer on speed. And so that's kind of something that you want to take into account. For L1s, I mean, if you want some finality, if you don't want to be beholden to like a data availability layer, maybe you build your own L1, but unless you take like a co-located validator approach, it's going to be really, really slow. And so I think like for the most part, like those are kind of the infrastructure design choices that you can make. And I think Hyperliquid, I think I'm really bullish on Fogo as well, like with the Pith team with Robert Saggs building a really cool L1 design for CLOBs. But honestly, I think Hyperliquid is kind of the L1 for CLOBs. Like I think it's going to be very hard to differentiate from Hyperliquid if you want to build this on an L1. So for me, the natural extension of this narrative is build it on rollups. And so I think there are cool designs happening across a number of different rollups, Bullet being one of them. And so I think that, you know, CLOBs on blobs is probably the next step. Like, let's see how fast we can get this stuff. Let's see how performant we can get it. You know, don't have to be beholden to consensus. Don't have to be beholden to like bootstrapping a network token, validators. Like just run it on an app specific rollup and see how high you can crank it, or run it on a really, really good general purpose rollup like Mega ETH. But I think it's clear that like Hyperliquid has shown that there are advantages to dedicating block space to a CLOB application.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's obviously growing. I mean, it's snowballing right now. But people are still using Binance. They're still going to be using centralized exchanges. What do you think is stopping someone from switching from Binance to something like Hyperliquid or Bullet?
I think the big one is like the onboarding and like just like the journey of like getting the users through the door. And like the big thing there is like these centralized exchanges have been able to go direct to consumer for like forever, right? Whereas like on the DeFi and DEX front, like really the capability to go direct to consumer is only like wrapped around in like the past like a year or like year or so. So I think that's like a huge one. And like we can now go direct to consumer. Like we can have the native apps, we can have like the embedded wallets, and like the provisioned wallets, and like we can have really smooth like on-ramping, bridging, all this sort of stuff. So it opens up the design space like quite a bit and like really widens the funnel for the decentralized exchanges.
Definitely, man. Shout out to Kanga
Yeah,
Analytics.
I was also going to say like,
oh yeah, go
I was
for
going
it.
to say on top of that, I think it's like, look at the like scale of the numbers, right? We're all crypto native. We all sit in CT and follow each other and yap about the same stuff. We know about all these protocols, but you talk to like a regular person on the street and like they barely even know what crypto is, right? Like I talk to my parents and they still don't understand anything about DeFi and what's going on and how it's any different to, using their like stockbroker account or something like that. And so I think there's just like a big knowledge and education gap. Things will definitely change over time. When you look at the numbers as well, like what does Hyperliquid have? Like 30K DAU that I saw, which like compared to Binance, I don't know what the Binance numbers are, but I know Binance has something like 260 million users. So, we're a fair few orders of magnitude off, I think, potentially. And those guys like have big marketing arms, branding presence. I've like kind of seen they have like thousands of employees, right? Like they're big multinational like organizations with like heaps of employees. They have the budgets to basically splatter all their logos over F1 cars and crazy stuff like that. Regular people don't know about this stuff, but yeah, I think over time, especially because like there's a good community effort pushing a lot of this stuff. A lot of the opportunities are on chain. It seems to spread like wildfire, I think, through the community. And I think over time, market share will definitely start to change. But yeah, look at us. Like we have technically zero marketing people, to be honest, on our team. Like we're very lean. We just build stuff. I remember I asked Jeff as well. I'm like, does anyone do marketing for you guys? And he's like, we have zero marketing people. It's just like everyone is just building and doing trading and stuff like that. So yeah, we're kind of like pretty under-resourced versus some of the bigger guys.
Yeah, I got you covered. We'll handle with marketing.
That's what we're doing.
I know what you mean, though. Everybody's eyes at the family dinner always glazes over if I talk about crypto. My mother said to me the other day, somebody asked a crypto question, I answered it. Nobody knew what it meant, but my mother said, "Boy, my son's smart." Anyways, gotta shout out Kanga Analytics over here, man. CLOB Wars is gonna be over when Tristan breaks out the guitar, dude. One of these days we are gonna have Tristan play something on these streams, man. We gotta have you break out. I'll get on the turntables. We'll be really in the CLOB then. You know what I mean? Like for real. Anyway, revenue meta gonna rise. Okay, yeah. We got that. So, anyways, kind of wanted to talk about the Bullet architecture. We're talking about CLOBs, and I want to talk about where Bullet fits into all this. We've touched on it a little bit, but how would you say Bullet's architecture solves the challenges of building a performant CLOB?
Do you want me to tackle that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a few things. I've kind of probably sound like a broken record at this point. There's a few things. Like I think fundamentally the most important one is just bringing down block times really quickly. I think there's like a point at which you get diminishing returns, but I think in the couple of 100 milliseconds, it's still kind of slow. You have the primary venue of price discovery, which is Binance essentially. A lot of kind of trades and repricings are happening there very live on the order book every few milliseconds. And then typically what's happening on DEX is, in the extreme case of AMMs, essentially things are getting arbed probably every couple of seconds on Ethereum, and prices get very out of date there. On Solana, it's definitely much, much faster, which is why we started building there. But even 400 milliseconds, it's like, you could get literally like 20 or more kind of price updates in that time essentially happen in that window. And so there tends to just be like a lot of arbitrage between the two, and it's always kind of like falling behind and kind of lagging a bunch of this stuff. And especially it's exciting for like, if we bring newer assets to the chain, we want price discovery to be happening as like a primary venue on chain. That's why I think it's really important for DEXs to kind of compete on the speed aspect with centralized exchanges. Personally, I'm like just very excited because this year I feel like it's kind of happening. Like we don't, like in previous years, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm trading on a DEX. In your mind, you're basically saying, hey, I'm willing to sacrifice a ton of speed and having to pay a ton of money and all these kind of like UX benefits. I'm going to Ethereum and I'm clicking a bunch of buttons and I'm sending off this transaction and I'm waiting 30 seconds for it to get included in the mempool. And I'm paying like $3 essentially for it to go through. And that's kind of like, that's what I'm paying for decentralization and self-custody, right? And I think that gap is like narrowing super, super fast. So yeah, one was like bringing down the block times. Like Sonny kind of mentioned, we have a bit of a different model because we use a roll-up design. We have this transaction streaming model. So as soon as something basically hits the sequencer, it can be executed, which is now taking like 2 milliseconds, and kind of issue a confirmation back to them. And that kind of gives that similar centralized exchange experience. So I think that's one bit which is really cool, which enables it. The other stuff is like, yeah, we can add all this kind of application specific sequencing. We can do cancel prioritization. We can basically like block MEV at the sequencer level, which I think is really good. And it's something that's just becoming, it's a huge problem in Ethereum land. It wasn't too much of a problem on Solana until like more recent years, I guess. And there've been a lot of efforts to clamp down on that. But there's still a lot of like sandwich attacks and other problems. Obviously the on-chain CLOB stuff is just suffering from these like toxic taker bots that essentially like always sniping off liquidity and leading to wider spreads. So I think, yeah, those are the two I'd probably call out, as well as the usual stuff like more flexibility and control over fee markets, not having them kind of skyrocket when there's like massive mints or other kind of meme coin drama going on, and having some proper isolation there. And yeah, congestion is, if you don't have congestion, it's just very hard to run like a super performant exchange. Like the thing that used to keep me up back in the day that I've talked about is like, when you can't get off liquidations, you can't let people close their trades because there's so much congestion on the network. You're sending stuff, the wheel is spinning essentially, and you're like watching your P&L go down in real time as the candle starts like wicking, and then you're like, shit, I need to get out of this trade. If that happened on a centralized exchange, you would get like a million support tickets and people would be very unhappy. And so that's just like not the experience that we want to have going forwards.
Yeah, I like to think about
those Discord group chats, and they're pretty painful when everyone is yelling at you and asking for their money back. So it's not pleasant.
Sorry,
I think going off what Tristan's saying, all the complicated performance stuff, right? I think where it matters is for the makers. I think for the takers, the only thing that they care about, I mean, maybe they care about speed, but I think even like 400 milliseconds is pretty fast for the average retail user. And they're not co-locating, so they don't really care what the fastest possible speed is. To them, what they care about is spreads. And if you optimize performance for the market maker, then you get good spreads for the user. And generally, the checklist I use is, how fast is it? Can it get faster than 10 milliseconds? Yes, well, it can. It's actually like 2 to 3 milliseconds, which is pretty crazy, reportedly, allegedly. And then it's
check the Explorer, it's all there.
Just creating some suspense. I think like the second thing I look at is, can it do gases trading, or can it reduce costs for the market maker? And Bullet can. And then the last point I look at is sort of like, if it needs to, can it do cancel prioritization? And with a dedicated network extension, Bullet can do that as well. And so those three things will make it really, really easy for market makers to tighten spreads as much as possible, so that users can get best execution.
Yeah, the one I would add on there, which is number 4, is actually API connectivity, and that's probably something that people in the crowd don't have as much exposure to unless they algo trade themselves. But it's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and working on. When you kind of integrate new traders and they come to your platform and they got to deal with stuff written in JavaScript and like random different API formats that are completely different to centralized exchanges, and they have to completely rewrite their stack that they had in C++ and start moving. And people kind of did that over the years with Solana, just because there was enough retail people trading there. People kind of chewed the glass, but it's very much not an optimal setup. And I think it's something that Hyperliquid at least has been applauded for is I think they had more standard REST APIs. It was obviously very performant, and then they kind of tailored things so it actually makes life easy for people to integrate. And that's very much like a note that we're taking, having talked to probably tens of market makers over the last like months and years. A big piece of feedback is, yeah, if people are going to go trade on these exchanges, you want to make their life easy. You know, are they going to justify 3 months integrating exchange? You know, and if that takes much less, maybe like a week or 2 weeks or something or other, I think that's like a much easier lift. They can plug in. They're already trading on Binance. They just kind of like tweak their stack a little bit. You know, create a new kind of connector or something or other, and it all kind of looks and feels in a similar sense. I think that's a great way to straight away just have 10 market makers plugged in, providing a bunch of liquidity, which, like Sonny said, is kind of quintessential to retail coming in and trading. No one wants to come in there and pay like 1% spreads to go and use a platform. It just basically feels like you're losing money. And I think that's always been like the criticism with like AMMs is you're always getting fleeced a lot of the time with like bad pricing. But if you can come in there and there's like 1 basis point spreads and you're trading, you're not losing money, I guess, because of the exchange's poor liquidity. You know, you're losing it because you made a bad trade. I think if you're getting hit on really bad spreads, it kind of feels like almost like the edge is getting taken out and I'm just basically getting taxed on every trade, which is not obviously how people want to feel.
Definitely not. That's not how I want to feel. I'll tell you that. Sonny, you kind of covered my next question. I was going to ask, you know, what got your attention with Bullet? So you kind of already answered that, but I did want to shout out some people in the chat. Nice t-shirt. Tristan, wearing mine too while I trade on the testnet Traders Domain Challenge 01. So guys, I do got to shout out our Traders Domain Challenge. If you want to get involved, there's rewards. All right, so get in our Discord and you can get involved in the Traders Domain. And shout out to everybody who participated in the Bullet Bug Bounty. We found a lot of bugs, we had a lot of fun, and we made a lot of friends. So thank you guys again for participating in that, all our bug bounty hunters. But get in that Traders Domain, man. You guys will have fun. Len, I need to remind you, any questions in the chat? Ask a question if you got them for Sonny or for the Bullet team. Oh, go ahead. Somebody's got something.
Jimmy, I can just add one more thing to what got me interested in Bullet.
I would love to hear it.
So
yes.
I talked about the Solana proximity as a network extension. I talked about like meeting the checklist for like everything that I'm looking for a highly performant CLOB. The last thing is it's almost done. Like I think it's close to mainnet. You know, we're not gonna like I don't think the team has revealed yet like any specific times. But if you go and try to testnet, like it works, like it's a good product, and I think that the team has spent over a year building this. And before that, they had experience already building like a derivatives CLOB on Solana. And so they can kind of port that over. And if you are trying to build a performant CLOB today, it's going to take a very, very long time. Like there are specific features that Tristan told me about that took them 6 months to build, like alone. And so I think like one of the things that people are kind of not realizing about the Bullet thesis is like you don't want to wait for all of these other CLOBs to continue to build their leads. Like you want to be able to launch like in 2025. Like you don't want to launch mainnet sometime in 2026. And so I think hopefully if all goes well, it seems like Bullet. If you guys are already looking for bug bounties, like I think it's getting pretty close. And so this will be one of the only viable products soon that you can actually go out and try that's highly performant. I think you can throw a lighter in there. But there's like not very many other products that are this close to being completed.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I think that's a really good point. That's like kind of our North Star, other than making the exchange very safe and very performant. I think it's just getting out there and iterating on user feedback and just having a real product. I think that's been the kind of going criticism on Twitter from a few folks who I won't name, who's just saying, everyone who's like claiming to be in pole position or whatever, or kind of in this CLOB War thing, they're all kind of posting testnet stats and the fact that they can do 1 million TPS with 1 millisecond latency and all this kind of stuff. And it's all very theoretical. And having built stuff in production, like theory is very different to production. People break stuff, things get slower or have all kinds of issues. So we want to get ahead of that. We want to do it very quickly. I'm not going to promise exact mainnet date, but it's definitely going to be like next quarter, Q3, probably early Q3, if not earlier, hopefully. We finished our audit. That's kind of all done and wrapped, and everything is patched. We have a pretty aggressive deadline internally to get out, which I won't share because people will hold me to that. But it's looking good. We finished most of the stuff. It's like, I would say at least 90% feature complete, which feels good. I'm actually spending a lot of time on like performance optimization, which is kind of these like final things of like, let's make it fast. You know, if it's 3 milliseconds, let's make it 2.5. Let's make it 2. Let's see how much TPS we can squeeze out. I like literally found yesterday there was just like a bunch of stuff that we done that was not optimal and that could be improved like a lot with pretty easy fixes. Actually made some pretty big fixes like yesterday. And one of our engineers found something else in how we're doing our database queries, and that already increased like 30%. So like all these things are coming in week on week, which is really nice. And yeah, it's pretty much like I'm just finalizing, putting the final scope on things. Pretty much all we need to do is finish off the bridge integration, finish off spot trading, which is a couple of weeks away. And then, yeah, just like polish off a bunch of the piping through, you know, some of the DA stuff. And then it's really about onboarding. How do we get people and how do we make that like a seamless experience? And then a bunch of it after that is non-tech stuff, you know, stability, I guess, and then just working on the go-to-market and bringing a bunch of users and iterating on product feedback as quickly as possible.
This is so. Let me tell you guys. I've been working with the Bullet team for a while here. All this happened. It was like the perfect storm. It was like lightning in a bottle. The CLOB narrative came up. We're like nearing mainnet. It's been crazy to watch. And talking to Onmol, Matrix, and Tristan during this whole kind of excitement. It's what has that been like for you guys? Tristan, I know I talked to you the day that you woke up to you know, a million DMs and retweets and all that stuff. How does it feel that people are finally waking up to the power of the CLOB?
Yeah, I mean, definitely felt really good, and got to shout out Sonny for like helping because I suck at marketing, and it's been really helpful that he's like, I think we had like a good 1.5 hour conversation where I just kind of mansplained a bunch of CLOB stuff, and it's good. I hear Sonny using some of the terms that I use of like noisy neighbors and other things, so I think he's kind of like taken some good notes there. But I kind of explained at least my perspective, and I think he largely agrees with a bunch of the points. And I think it's good. Like people view us as like being pretty honest builders in the space. We have a track record. Like I said, we actually have not a white paper, but a real product out there, and I think that goes a long way. And our approach, I think, in tackling the CLOB stuff is like sufficiently differentiated. It's built from the ground up. We're not just like forking OP stack and then just slapping some like off-chain CLOB on it or whatever it might be, some like lazy solution. Like it's very custom built, it's very purpose built. And on top of that, yeah, like I think a lot of the new teams like have just come in there and it's like, oh, this is the hot thing. It's a lot of narrative chasing. You see this a lot in crypto, right? It's like, what was it a couple of years ago? It was NFTs, and then we had gaming, and then we had AI and all this kind of stuff. And as us sitting in the builder seat, like you're seeing all this kind of stuff. You're seeing everyone like getting a bunch of mind share and their products doing well, and we're just kind of slaving away on this kind of product for quite some time. And so it was cool, like at least with Bullet specifically and the kind of pivot that we did there. We've been working on it, yeah, pretty much a year. And I don't think many people paid attention. Like the people who were in the trenches who I think understood or who traded on our platform before understood it. We had like good rep in the Solana space, but yeah, I think in broader circles was just like largely unknown what was going on and who's going to go through. And I don't blame them, like read all the docs that I wrote, like, you know, it's kind of boring. So it's nice, like when Sonny writes like a really like well thought out, you know, Twitter thread, or he publishes a Messari article that really analyzes it. And it's got like that third party perspective that he can kind of like objectively break down a bunch of stuff. I think that goes a long way. And then it's really nice when guys with a big audience, like I think Ansem's basically been the main character on CT, and I've literally known him since before he was like big on Solana. You know, now he's like the Solana guy, but yeah, he was at the Breakpoint conferences and like I think I met him in 2022. We were just like chilling, and we're at like one of the last kind of Breakpoint events, and I was just kind of like having a chat to him. And this is at the time when Solana was not cool. Solana was like worth like very little, or he'd already crashed off a bunch of the Solana stuff. People were kind of pretty unhappy with it. And he was just like, yeah, I'm exploring the Solana space. I've been looking at it for quite a while. It's super interesting. The people that are here, and there's this weird like diehard mentality where like these builders don't want to leave the ecosystem because they're like, we love the performance and we love the culture here. And there's this kind of like I kind of make the joke that it's like the 300 Spartans, you know, like the 75 devs that are left that are just like holding the line. And he was like, yeah, this is like mega bullish. And, you know, if this continues to go and like the narrative kind of shifts in that favor, then Solana is going to go on an absolute tear. And he was completely right.
Definitely, man. Amol, what about you? What's it been like for you from the co-founder of Bullet perspective? Just everything, this lightning in a bottle moment of the CLOB Wars.
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I think the main things is just like the things that we were high conviction on and like stayed high conviction on. I guess like there's like Solana, perps, CLOBs, and like that hasn't changed and has like never changed. And now it's just, I think a year ago when we started Bullet, it was like that thing that Tristan mentioned where it was just like we looked at the product and we're like, okay, no, like let's start from scratch and let's build like the best thing possible and like not make any excuses. Like let's just do that, nail that. So it's been good to get the awareness, but yeah, now we gotta ship this thing to mainnet, get the users through the door, get the liquidity there. Still a lot to do.
Let's go.
Yeah, I think Animal also brought up a funny point. Like clubs are not anything new. They've been around for like decades. And
Exactly,
it's kind of funny that this is trending now. Everyone's kind of like crypto Twitter has just discovered what an order book is. It's kind of funny.
Well, and it is funny because for me, I came into crypto in kind of a unique way, and I started on CLOBs. So I've been known about CLOBs, but it's yeah, it is kind of crazy to see the momentum and the snowballing that's been going on with the CLOB narrative. Speaking of that, Sonny, I wanted to get your perspective on where the CLOB Wars goes from here. Like, where does this narrative go from here? Where do you see it 6 months from now?
I think in 6 months from now, it will still be a very Hyperliquid dominated world, but you will start seeing, I think a good example I bring up is Lighter, right? Like when Lighter launched, it hit $2 billion in daily volume pretty fast. And a lot of that was because like Hyperliquid traders who, they're trading all day anyway. And they wanted some like extra incentives on top, moved to Lighter to try to farm some of those points. And so very early on, I think it'll be an incentives-based game. I think you'll see a lot of these CLOBs launch. And many of them will have issues early on. It will be competitive. It'll be a fight for takers. But like one thing that people don't really realize about Hyperliquid is they had a product that you could trade real money on for like I think almost 2 years now. And throughout that, like if you look at Hyperliquid as an early product, it looks completely different than what Hyperliquid is today. And I think that's the advantage that these guys will have in getting their product to prod and mainnet early, is they will have time over the next 6 months to like continuously iterate on this product. And then eventually at some point, you're going to have a bunch of CLOBs. Some of them will probably die out. I mean, you've seen this with like the alt L1 narrative, right? Like obviously the money is going to front run the narrative, or the money and the narrative is going to front run the actual usage. And you get all this money pouring into all these alternative layer ones or layer twos. And then now we realize, okay, actually the market could not support 50 layer ones, I guess. So like it's kind of congregated around a couple. And so I think for the next 6 months to a year, it will probably be a battle, like both from the investment side, like people trying to invest in speculative, like alternative CLOBs trying to compete with Hyperliquid. The CLOBs themselves will be fighting for users. But after a year, it'll be like, okay, like what's the actual value proposition of the CLOB itself? And I think Bullet, out of most of the CLOBs that I've talked to and I've highlighted, has one of the clearest value propositions within the entire space, which is just look, if you're on Solana and you want a performant like perp trading or spot trading experience through an on-chain order book, just deposit into Bullet. And I think eventually that will show through. So you'll probably get ups and downs. You'll get Hyperliquid points farmers moving from here and from this application to the other. It'll look really noisy, but then, a year or two down the line, you want to see who actually has like a real value proposition to a real set of users. And I think kind of isolating for those CLOBs makes sense, because I think even though like 90% of these alt L1s never panned out, you got your Solana, like you got like Avalanche is still doing quite well. Like you've got your Squeeze and your Aptos. And so I think like you got Base. And so I think like the narrative, the narrative is going to do what the narrative is going to do. Like it's going to get crazy. It's going to get exciting. Hopefully, like hopefully we see some crazy valuations too. I think that'll be fun. But down the line, like there's going to be a couple of winners. I could definitely see it. I don't know if that's going to happen in like 6 months or a year or 2 years, but I could definitely see there being like 3, 4, 5 players in this space. You know, everyone's kind of winning. There's plenty of white space to take from Binance, from Bybit, etc. But yeah, like I imagine everyone's going to have to go through that growing period of you know, waiting through users, having points farmers come in and then leave, you know, fighting for takers, fighting for makers. But you know, the advantage that Bullet has is it's going to be out early, and it's going to be fixing a lot of issues before other protocols actually even get there.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I'll kind of echo on top of that. I have no disillusionment that like the next 6 months to a year are going to be hyper competitive. And it's always been competitive in crypto. This is something that like turned me away from perps in 2021. It's why we did options, because I looked at like, oh, there were 10 other protocols doing this on Solana at the time. And I'm like, why am I going to compete with all these guys? I got to go in the greenfields bit and just like build my own thing and, you know, do options that hopefully one day will kind of take off. And I think my like bit of learning there was options didn't have a ton of retail PMF at the time, and we probably built the wrong thing. And so I've kind of changed my opinion that I think the bar, I don't want to say it's like still kind of low in crypto, but people play on these shorter time horizons. And the fact that we've been around for 4 years and keep building, I think that resilience kind of shows through. We've also learned a lot of stuff through those years, essentially, you know, on the product side, on the growth side, on, you know, whatever it might be, essentially. And you're seeing a bunch of these new teams come in there that haven't kind of gone through their first boom and bust cycle, haven't even launched their first product at all. So I think there's like a lot of learnings there. Yeah, it's going to be competitive. We're heads down. We're executing. I'm kind of confident with our team. We can do some good stuff there. And I think, yeah, like the timing worked out really well. But like Sonny mentions as well, like there's so much upside, I feel like. If you looked at like a couple of years ago, I remember looking at the leaderboards and what was the total like perps volume across all dexes? You know, it was less than $1 billion probably. And what are we doing now? It's like 5 billion, 10 billion, 15 billion on some days. You know, just the kind of dex market share has grown so much on the perp side and on the spot side. And you're seeing Bybit's like launching their own dex, like Binance is launching their own dex. Every centralized exchange is trying to get into the dex space. It's kind of what's hot. So I think just obviously you're going to win in that kind of dex vertical, but obviously the whole dex vertical, I think itself is going to grow massively. I don't know if it's going to flip centralized exchanges. I kind of hope it does, but I think there'll be a room for both. But I think, you know, we've got at least another 10, if not, you know, much greater. And then there's traditional finance, you know, people talking about, let's put equities on chain. Let's do all this kind of crazy stuff. I think that's going to become more normalized and more people are going to be exploring the space. And personally, I don't know if I have a bias. I probably do. But like, I think that the nimble teams, the agile teams that understand it really well, who have built these products for years, are going to outcompete versus like a Coinbase type organization that's going to come in there with 5,000 people. It's going to dedicate a 100-person team to building this like dex, and then none of them are like founders, none of them are like bought into doing this thing. They're working in some slow moving org with a bunch of red tape. Right. And I think we've seen time and time again over the years, like those things just basically never work. Those guys are never pushing the frontier of innovation. So yeah, I think it's like sets up a kind of good spot for us and some of the other folks in this kind of like CLOB Wars space.
Definitely, man. It's going to be a big year, I think it's safe to say. But we are coming up on time here. Anmol, Matrix, any parting thoughts? No?
Nothing relating to CLOB Wars, but like in general, like we are hiring a bunch. So looking for growth marketing people, looking for Rust devs, also like mobile devs, we'll get that out there as well. But yeah, looking to hire so we can really hit the ground running and grow really fast. So just reach out.
Yeah, reach out to the Bullet team. Make sure you're following them on Twitter. Follow all these guys. Their ads are in the title. Shout out to M, Kanga Analytics, Hikaru, Christina. Christina likes the shirt too, it looks like. Kanga Analytics says this cycle is going to be revenue meta. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. Special thanks to DeFi Monk, a.k.a. Sonny. Sonny, thank you so much for joining us, man. This was an awesome conversation. Would love to have you back anytime. And, you know, thanks to the Bullet team, Matrix, Anmol, Tristan. I have a feeling these guys are going to get back to building. Is that?
I'm going to sleep. It's like.
Oh, you want to sleep? All right. Yeah, it's morning where I live. I know it's late. My bad.
Yeah. Also, like, yeah. Big thanks to Sonny. Appreciate him getting on and obviously kind of covering a lot of the stuff in the space. And I believe he has a really cool report coming up. So I'm eagerly awaiting that at least.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
Definitely, man. All right, so we're going to be doing these every 2 weeks. Catch us 2 weeks from today. We'll be back to talk about CLOBs, Solana, and Bullet, and everything in between. So right now, we're going to head to Bullet City at the center of CLOB Nation. We'll catch you next time, guys.